Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Chicago Bears have a brand new offense overnight. Also, the Falcons already have their replacement for Kirk Cousins, and the Vikings replaced Kirk Cousins with a younger version of Kirk Cousins. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The Chicago Bears had 2 top 10 picks in the first round, and they used them to instantly remake their offense.
The Chicago Bears have made a selection in the 2024 NFL Draft. Alongside Locked On College Football host Spencer McLaughlin, I'm Tenitra Batiste, and we're joined by Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears to break down the Bears selecting Caleb Williams with the number 1 pick. So, Lauren, Caleb Williams' numbers may not have shown it in his junior year, but obviously the 2022 Heisman Trophy winner has the goods. What's the biggest strength he brings to this Bears offense?
Yeah, I think it starts first and foremost with the playmaking ability to be able to go off script and make magic happen when everything seems to be breaking out. But like specifically playmaking with his arm, because the Bears had playmaking ability at the quarterback position, but it was a little bit more focused on playmaking with the legs at that point. But Caleb almost stubbornly stays in the pocket, sometimes too long, to try and extend these plays and make something happen. And sometimes it can be a detriment when he tries to do a little bit of too much. But I think I'd rather have a quarterback who wants to do a little bit too much for his team than maybe not quite enough for his team. And he can be honed in exactly where you want him to be that kind of special passer that Chicago has really never had at the quarterback position.
Yeah, and when you think about that, what's the biggest thing offensive coordinator Shane Waldron will have to work on maybe to get Williams ready to be QB1 in game 1?
Yeah, I think it's about toning down some of that hero ball play, like not playmaking. You don't want to make him timid or scared or afraid to pull the trigger. I think they kind of overcorrected that with Justin Fields a little bit too, but like reminding him that he doesn't have to do everything. You know, at USC, his defense was giving up 35 points a game for a long stretch there. So he always felt like, man, I had to score more. I have to do more. I have to make this play here for my team. I got to put my receivers in position. But the Bears are in a spot here in Shane Waldron's offense where they can say, listen, you've got Keenan Allen, you've got DJ Moore, you've got Cole Kmet, you've got DeAndre Swift in the backfield. Let your playmakers make plays. And when you have to do something great, be yourself and do that, but don't feel like you have to do everything for these guys. We are more of a team effort here in this offense, and we can make your life much easier.
Indeed. Now, of course, there was no shock with this pick, Lauren, but just out of curiosity, were there any last-minute rumblings about the possibility of the Bears maybe trading the pick away?
No, this has been locked in, I think, for longer than we realize, too. Like, this is a process. Certainly, by the NFL Combine, the Bears were 100% in on Caleb Williams. After the Combine, Caleb didn't give every team medical testing, but he did give the Bears some of his medicals at the Combine, and it was enough for them to say, all right, we're good to go. This is our guy. And then it's just been dotting their I's and crossing their T's up to that point. But this process started back in January when they were interviewing his quarterbacks coach, Cliff Kingsbury, as the Bears offensive coordinator, grilling him about what Caleb Williams was like. They go to the Senior Bowl, and they're asking his USC and Oklahoma teammates, hey, what is Caleb Williams like? They've really been really hyper-focused on Caleb and looking for any reason to disqualify him or any reason to want to pick someone else. And everywhere along the way, it is all aligned toward this pick defining the franchise.
The Bears selecting Rome Odunze with the number 9 pick. So, Lauren, the Bears went for offense with both their picks in the first round. Were you surprised?
No, this was clearly the best player available on the draft board with the 9th pick, and a kind of a dream scenario for Chicago Bears fans. There's a lot of feeling like maybe he wouldn't make it all the way to 9, that all 3 of the top receivers in this draft would go in that top 8, and the Bears might be the first defensive player or something off the board. But no, they get their pass catcher to pair with their young quarterback. The Bears have veteran receivers already on the roster, but Odunze, it's not just about this year with him. It's about the next 10 to 15 years of pairing quarterback with young receiver, that these guys can be, eventually the idea is the long-term franchise record holder for career best passer and career best receiver, because both of those records are not all that hard to beat if you end up just spending enough time in Chicago.
Indeed. Now, let's talk a little bit more about Rome. What do you like about what he brings to the table?
Yeah, Rome Odunze instantly plugs in as a great route runner with good size, good speed. Like, he's not going to be the fastest guy in the field. He's not going to be the biggest guy in the field, but he's going to be bigger than most people and faster than most people. And when you combine that with his intelligence as a route runner to sort of get a feel for what coverage the defense is in and how to find his openings within that, plus really strong hands and a great ability to track the deep ball downfield, like, he's everything you want in a receiver, and he doesn't have to be everything right away. He can really get more favorable matchups in Chicago with two great receivers on the outside and grow into a bigger and bigger role as he adjusts to the NFL game.
Stay up to date on the Chicago Bears by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Bears on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, the Falcons used their first round pick not to help Kirk Cousins, but to get ready to replace him. Before we get to that, we take a look at the NBA playoff games from last night, including a 38-point blowout. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime, and the scoreboard is not looking too good. You're feeling low, not sure you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep. You lift your head up and you say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heist, and take as much of my friend's money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches in the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. Make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. Charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put your game face on, and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels, app part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Orlando Magic beat the Cleveland Cavaliers by 38. Yeah, points, 38 points.
This is Philip Rossman-Wright, the host of Locked On Magic, and the first time since 2011, the playoff confetti is falling here at the Kia Center as the Orlando Magic defeat the Cleveland Cavaliers. They've climbed back into the series 2-1. In all actuality, this was a game that was all about the Magic playing with their backs against the wall. They needed to win. They needed to find their offense. They needed to see some shots go down. And when they finally did, the dam broke, and their defense played with the impact that they did in Cleveland, and they went out and won the game. They went out and ran away with it, winning by an obscenely large amount, the third largest playoff victory in Magic history. But this game is going to be remembered as the day that playoff Paolo was born. Paolo Banchero with 31 points in 3 quarters, shot 50% from the floor, 13 for 26, added 14 rebounds. He stepped up the way that a star has to step up, and in a big game, in a big moment, in a must-win situation, he made all the tough shots to make Cleveland scratch their head and wonder, how are we going to beat this team?
Philadelphia 76ers got one back on the Knicks as the series moved to the city of brotherly love.
How can I phrase this? I've interviewed a couple of hockey enforcers back in the day, and they'd refer to this kind of hamster on the wheel in their head that just kind of starts going, and all of a sudden steam starts coming out of their ears, and it's kind of putting the quarter in the angry machine. The Knicks did that tonight with Joel Embiid, and you know what they did? The New York Knickerbockers tugged on Superman's cape. And don't be surprised when you tug on that cape, Superman turns around and starts swinging. In the beginning, it looked like frustration. There were 3 personal fouls in the early goings of the game to Joel Embiid. They tried to get one taken away with a challenge. They ended up not getting to win that challenge, unfortunately. They lost it. But after that moment in the second quarter, Joel Embiid went to another level in the game. You have other things that we're going to get into as part of the big 3, but the number one thing is Joel Embiid's 50-point night. Career high and also highest amount of points for a 76ers player since Allen Iverson in 2003.
And on the playoff ice, the Islanders look to get on the board at home against the Hurricanes.
Coming into this game, we knew that the only realistic chance the Islanders had of getting back into this series was to win Game 3. And look, you had to really kind of win both games at UBS, but if you win Game 3, you get the momentum change, you get a little lift, you get some confidence. All of a sudden, the Hurricanes are not this insurmountable object that you can't overcome. And Patrick Roy took a gamble. The gamble was putting Ilya Sorokin back between the pipes and having Sorokin start Game 3. And look, we all know Semyon Varlamov was not the reason that the Islanders lost the first 2 games of this series. He played well in Game 1. He was not giving up lots of soft goals in Game 2, a game that, the Islanders lost it 5-3. One of the net goals was an empty netter, but that game could have easily been 7-1 the way, the shot attempts and shots were in that contest. So can't blame Varley for that. And yet I understood why you were gambling with Sorokin.
The Falcons signed Kirk Cousins this offseason to a lucrative 4-year deal. They decided to use their first draft pick not in support of him, but to potentially replace him.
Falcons have made a selection in the 2024 NFL Draft. Alongside Locked On College Football host Spencer McLaughlin, I'm Tenitra Batiste, and we are joined by Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons to break down the Falcons selecting Michael Penix Jr. with the number 8 pick. So, Aaron, first of all, I know there was a thought that the Falcons might go for a skilled player for the 4th year in a row, but did you see the Falcons going for this skilled player after landing Kirk Cousins in free agency?
Not at all, T. This blindsided me. I did a podcast the other day saying there was a 0% chance that the Falcons would take a quarterback this high in the draft. And even in a world where I thought it was maybe possible, I never thought it would have been Michael Penix. I know there were a lot of rumors in recent weeks that, the Falcons and Penix were quite fond of each other, but this one caught me off guard.
Indeed. And why do you think in the end the Falcons decided to go after Penix at that 8th spot?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the Falcons really, truly believing that they were a quarterback away this offseason. And basically the only significant move they've really made this offseason in terms of, improving their roster was adding Kirk Cousins. And I think they felt like they had the luxury where they could take a flyer on a quarterback like Michael Penix, who's probably going to sit for 2 years behind Kirk Cousins because the Falcons have basically $90 million guaranteed to Kirk Cousins over the next 2 years. And they basically have 90 million reasons why Michael Penix is going to ride the bench for the next 2 years. But it's going to be an interesting situation because we've never really seen a team really commit to sitting a quarterback at this high in the draft. Everybody talks about, hey, the Packers sat Jordan Love and they sat Aaron Rodgers for 3 years, but both of those guys were picked like pick 25, pick 26. It's a lot different when you're picking guys at that point in the draft where usually you're getting second round caliber players and in the top 10 in this draft where a lot of really blue chip offensive players. We saw, a lot of these offensive players go high in this draft, and you had a real opportunity potentially to get someone to help Kirk Cousins over the next couple of years where he's the starting quarterback, or get a difference maker, one of the top difference makers on the defensive side of the ball at that pick. And the Falcons decided they wanted to go to secure their long-term future at the quarterback position, part because of how many issues they've had in the years since Matt Ryan. And they deemed that Michael Penix over JJ McCarthy, over Bo Nix and others was their best bet there.
Indeed. And Free, as you mentioned, we talked about this a couple days ago on our Locked On Falcons show, as well as some of our other shows here in Atlanta. Now, you had Dallas Turner going to the Falcons. Speaking of that defensive game changer, why do you think maybe Turner would have been the best choice for the Falcons?
Well, anybody who knows anything about the Atlanta Falcons knows that their pass rush has been one of the worst pass rushers in the NFL for 10, 15 years. And so pretty much anybody that could come in and produce in that arena would help this team immediately. And obviously the Falcons did not necessarily feel like any of these pass rushers, whether it was Dallas Turner of Alabama, Laiatu Latu of UCLA, Byron Murphy of Texas, Jared Verse of Florida State, were as good as the quarterback. They felt like getting that quarterback situation secured long-term, and assuming Michael Penix is the long-term answer, because we know quarterbacks this high in the draft, it's about 40, 60 in terms of the hit rate on those guys. So even then, Michael Penix is by no means a sure thing. But they felt like he was the best player available for them at that pick.
Stay up to date all year on the Atlanta Falcons by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Falcons on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the Vikings liked Kirk Cousins so much they drafted a younger him. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. You could also combine the prop bets into a same-game parlay for an even bigger payout. Game 3 of the first-round battle between the Pacers and Bucks is in Indy. FanDuel likes the Pacers at home by 6 in this one. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The Minnesota Vikings were looking for their quarterback to take over now that Kirk Cousins is gone. They ended up drafting someone with a lot of the same traits.
The Vikings have made a selection in the 2024 NFL Draft. Alongside Locked On college football host Spencer McLaughlin, I'm Tenitra Batiste, and we're joined by Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings to break down the Vikings selecting JJ McCarthy with the number 10 pick. So when you saw that Minnesota was moving up the draft board into that 10th spot where the New York Jets resided, did you think they were going up to get JJ McCarthy?
For sure. Yeah, you wouldn't do that, bother with that if you were taking like Dallas Turner or something, or, some tackle or whatever. But so you knew it was for JJ McCarthy, but my experience was actually, I found out that the Jets were trading the pick before I found out it was to the Vikings. So I was like, oh no, did we get leapfrogged? Because by then I know I'm not a fan of Bo Nix at all. Sorry, Broncos fans. So if it wasn't going to be McCarthy, I was going to start spiraling pretty quick.
And that's funny you mentioned that, Luke, because that was going to be kind of my quick follow-up question about whether or not JJ McCarthy was the right way to go, because some pundits did say, hey, if they moved up, it might have been Bo Nix.
I never really bought that. They've been really high on McCarthy for the whole process. Through the combine, that leaked out a lot. There's been rumors everywhere. It just makes a lot of sense. He's going to kind of go from everybody sees his surroundings at Michigan as good. I think they weren't that good. I think a lot of those players are a little overrated in terms of what they do for the pass game. They were more run players, right? Run blockers, Blake Corum, that kind of thing. Great run game. Now he goes to a team with a good pass game. Bookend tackles, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Hawkinson. When he's healthy, he probably will miss a good portion of the first season, but he'll get there eventually. So he's got targets, he's got protection, and he's got a coach that was hired specifically for this, specifically to develop a young QB. This was the plan. This was the vision.
You think the early run on QBs influenced the pick for the Vikings at all?
No. So my understanding is that they tried very hard to trade up with the Patriots, and the Patriots said, nope, we're taking May. And then they basically started watching the board. I'm sure that every single team above them knew, don't take a trade offer without calling the Vikings first. We'll beat it. and everybody stuck and and everybody stuck and picked, and that means that the Vikings didn't have to spend nearly as much as I thought they were going to have to.
Exactly. Chalk might have actually helped instead of hurting them. You mentioned Justin Jefferson. So is he maybe confident in, or will he be satisfied with this pick after the Vikings lost Kirk Cousins in the offseason?
He said a lot at Radio Row at the Super Bowl was where he got asked this a lot. And he always said, I'll be me no matter who. We'll make it work no matter who it is. I love Kirk, but it'll work no matter who. And this was before we even knew Kirk Cousins was leaving. I don't think it matters to him very much. I think that's a pretty overrated talking point. But yeah, I think that we got to work on that deep ball a little bit with JJ McCarthy. But having Justin Jefferson to track those down is going to help him a lot.
Now, Spencer, it felt like JJ McCarthy made this meteoric rise up the draft board these last few weeks. What about McCarthy made him that much of a hot commodity in the end?
It's his physical traits, Tanitra, the way that he is able to combine being an elite runner while also having a big arm. He's got a clean motion, and he wasn't asked to do a lot at Michigan, but proponents of JJ McCarthy will say that, well, that doesn't mean he can't do a lot. It's just the system that he was running. And certainly he's going into a really high level passing situation with maybe the best receiver in the entire NFL in Justin Jefferson, who has made what I think is the greatest catch in the history of the league, even better than Odell Beckham's. I mean, he had a couple guys on him. OBJ's was cake. He was uncovered, basically, not actually, but I think JJ McCarthy is someone who, reminds me a little bit of Josh Allen, where you're not wowed by what he did in college on the field. You're wowed by what he can do, what could be. And if you put him in the right situation, he can thrive. And I think the Vikings are a great quarterback situation to go to.
Stay up to date all year on the Minnesota Vikings by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Vikings on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. And finally, the Los Angeles Rams did something they haven't done in almost a decade. They picked a defensive player in the first round. Heck, this was their first pick in 8 years. Jared Verse, Florida State, defensive end. Is he a special player? I don't know. But he's special in at least this way. So we'll see. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn on the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, we tell you who has the best NFL draft. So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on Sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.